Penny, welcome to the Wise podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Honestly, I'm so delighted that you joined me. I was recommended to speak to you by a previous guest and also a friend, Hannah Godfrey, and she says such wonderful things about you. And now I've looked at your LinkedIn and seen your incredible career and all the work that you've been doing to support women. Delighted that we could have you here today. So I've gone through your bio, and there's a lot there, Penny. You've had an amazing career. You've worked across so many different businesses. We're talking startups, global enterprises. I'd love to just start out with going a little bit right back. What drew you into B2B tech and revenue leadership? And again, your passion really comes through for me. Why do you believe that tech is one of the best places for women in particular to build those really long-term careers?
So, thank you so much for having me. Yes, we're in good company. Hannah Godfrey's awesome and another female advocate. So, yeah, go Hannah if she's watching. Okay, so you asked me the question about where I started and when I got into tech, and actually, it wasn't really tech; it was sales that drove me. I was attracted to sales. I started many years ago, showing my age, and it was ad sales. So SDR, think SDR, 80 calls a day, handing in a call sheet, great training for sales, by the way. And I was drawn to sales through the kind of high risk reward. It's very easy to see in sales when you do well. It's so performance driven that actually I was kind of addicted to the smashing my targets and the commission, to be quite frank. So I started in sales and loved that. Then went into the city, and the city, just the stakes were higher and the commission checks were higher, actually. But what I did was elevate to enterprise sales. And that was my journey towards B2B services, and then went into tech. And the reason I wanted to go into tech was I loved sales. I loved the risk reward, as I've said, but actually tech was really exciting because it was fast paced, cutting edge. And one of the reasons why I've continued to stay in technology is because it seems to be relatively recession proof within reason, right? I mean, there's the innovation of AI, the innovation of software and SaaS companies. In the UK in particular, in the US, you've got a real hub and drive and money and investment that goes into new startups all the time. So that's why I think it's an amazing career, because you get that risk reward, but mostly reward if you're good at sales, that instant hit of I've done well, I've hit my target, I'm getting paid on it. But also, and there's glory and celebration with that, right? And also, I think with sales, you're very close to revenue. The closer you are to revenue, the closer you are to senior leadership, to be quite honest. But then software is that added sort of fast pace, relatively recession proof business. So that's why I've chosen software. Your other question was, why do I think women would be good actually in this industry? Well, mostly because sales, no matter what, when you sort of look at the science and art of sales, it's all about people and connecting with people, because people buy from people, right? And even though there's AI, and we can talk about this another time, but will SDRs or salespeople become irrelevant because of AI? I don't believe so, because we're all humans at the end of the day, and human interaction is really important. And women in particular can be very, very good. Not everyone, but women in particular can be good at listening, with empathy and connection. And I think those are natural attributes, not only for a salesperson, but also a sales leader, because a leader as well is about connecting with people, motivating people, people thinking you have their back, and therefore their trust is built and they'll tend to be high performing.
Love all of that, Penny. I love, your trajectory. You've been exposed to a lot. You've definitely found yourself in a place of, I think tech sales is such a fast moving industry to be part of. And it's wonderful to see your growth into such senior level positions. You've held CRO positions before. You're now consulting, you're advising. So you're definitely an inspiration to lots of women. And I think you really nailed it there. There's so many attributes that women have that makes someone who could be really successful in this field. It's not, I always say with what I'm trying to achieve with Wise, it's not this scary, competitive, overtly masculine or aggressive environment. It actually offers you so much. So I'd love to segue into female sales leaders and actually talk about your book. You recently co-authored a book called The Female Sales Leader. And it's not just a book, right? It's got a real mission to empower more women to lead, be heard, and succeed in tech sales. And I remember when we spoke preparing to recording, and you told me that really the book speaks to three audiences. You have women in sales, or those who maybe aspire to be in sales. You've got male allies. Love this call out in the book. So I'm definitely keen to pick your brains on this. And also organizations. So why don't you talk to me a bit about something about like the biggest misconception of each of those groups and what they still think or feel about women in tech, women in revenue leadership, and what do they most need to understand instead?
Yeah, if I may, I'll just before I jump into that, and absolutely will talk about the mission a bit more. So why did we? It was actually Andy White at Medic who came up with the idea, and he, for any of those know that Medic is one of pretty much the go-to playbooks, sales methodology for coaching and qualification, and he works with a lot of high performing sales teams, high performing playbook companies in software. And one of the common things he was seeing was that there aren't that many women in revenue leadership, yet he was seeing some of the highest performers in sales teams are women. He was confused, but had some theories as to why he thinks there just aren't enough women in revenue leadership. And I can speak from myself that I have consistently been in my career a minority, particularly in the C-suite, and particularly as I've gone up in leadership roles. So his mission was really about, well, why is this? But not only why, but how do we change this? So the mission of the female sales leader is how do we get more women into B2B C-suite commercial-led roles? And my co-authors, Lucy William-Jones and also Marina Eiton, were my co-authors and champions are also championing this. There were a number of things that came out of the research, actually. And I would say there are about 30 contributors that came, men and women, that contributed to this book. So it wasn't just us. And it was really steeped in real life stories, actionable tips and practical steps that, as you said, the three audiences can take. One, which is women coming into sales or thinking about it as a career, or women who are in sales and want to take that first step or next step into management. It's also for male allies, because actually we must have male allies, because by nature of the fact there are more men than women in the profession, if they don't come and help and support their female allies, then it's not going to change enough, right? We need everyone, the community, to come together. And then the organizations, it's about educating. How do you know what to do? Because often I think the research showed that most people want to have a diverse team. Most people want to have diverse leadership teams. It's not for sitting there and saying, oh, I don't want women in sales, but they don't really know how to attract more because there aren't enough around. So looking at what we saw, actually the reality is a lot of the drop-off happens really around childbearing ages. So that's usually the time when women would go into management or are in management and they may get passed up for opportunity. So that, I think, there were three aspects of what we looked at. One was, how do we get more women into sales? And you talked about it. It's not all about being a male, chest-beating, aggressive environment. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute because I think it is in part still, but we'll park that and come back to it. But how do you get more women into sales? And I think we were seeing in the female sales that the trajectory is improving. There are more women coming into sales. The problem is still that there's not enough going into senior management, right? And I think the reality is there are a bunch of reasons why, which I'll come on to. I think the other thing we saw was that actually, coming back to my point, it's not through want of trying, but it's actually not understanding even behavioral things that happen. So I'm going to give you an example that will help kind of explain the point I'm trying to make. We did a working group session. We invited some people to the session to talk about some of the common challenges. And it just so happened that in this group of about 30, only 3 of them were men. And that wasn't intentional. It just ended up happening that way. So we started the round table and everyone had to go around and introduce themselves, say what they did, and then say what they wanted to talk about in this session, this working group. We went round and there was a gentleman who stood up, and he is very senior in a playbook company, a VP of sales. He has a very diverse team. He's very passionate about the project. But what was really interesting is when he got up and introduced himself, he said, do you know, I feel a bit awkward. He said, I just thought I feel a bit nervous. And he said, I get up and talk in front of hundreds of people all the time, and I couldn't work out why I feel so uncomfortable. And he said, I've had this lightning bulb moment where I realized I'm a minority in a room and everyone here is female and I'm not. And he said that I was worried that I might say something wrong or something in a way that might not work. And he said that's made me think that maybe people who are a minority in a room feel that way all the time because they sound different, they look different, they may say something in a way that doesn't resonate and land. And let's be honest, one of the other bits of research that came through was that many women who sit in a room often feel like they're not heard properly. Or if they say something, it's repeated by a male colleague and everyone goes, oh, oh yes, yes. But they don't say, oh, yes, to what they've said. They feel like we call it mansplaining. But I think that's because when you think about the sort of herd mentality or the how we are naturally as humans, it's we group together in people that we know and sound like us, right? And feel like us. That's where we feel more comfortable naturally. And so when there's a majority of men, by irrespective of what that's intended, the minority group are going to feel uncomfortable. And so what I thought was good about that story and that example is that it's unintentional. And therefore, one of the biggest things people need to do is educate themselves and be open to educating. What does it feel like to be a minority? Once you have that step of understanding, I think it can then inform behaviors. So that's one of the steps. I think it's unintentional. Education is really important. Understanding what that feeling is really important.
Yeah, it's such a good call out because I think women also we bring so many different. You mentioned some of our attributes that we could bring to the table, but let's take leadership. In my career, I have been told in the past, in previous roles, sometimes that I'm not tough enough. And I wonder whether that's because what sales leadership has looked like through maybe some of my male counterparts in the past has been more tough, has been very KPI metric driven. But actually, the way that I work, and I have led extremely successful teams, scaled many companies to multi-million-dollar revenues. I've been very successful in my career through empathetic leadership and bringing a very different approach to how I mentor and guide my team. So I think the unintentional part is absolutely true. I don't think he meant to be obnoxious or rude to me. I think that was just his management style was that, and I was not displaying or mirroring the same behaviors as him. But actually what I was bringing to the table was just as successful, but with a very different edge.
I mean, you've raised a couple of really good points there, right? And that you're not alone. Okay. And the problem when we think about it being an aggressive environment is that we talk about sales very much in numbers. And that's not wrong, right? You have to, because that's sales. But we almost over index on the numbers and completely dial down on the people, right? And actually, people will be successful if you give them the right tools. Yes, if they understand the clarity of the role, but they also know you've got their back. And that's what we talk about, this psychological safety. This people will overperform, or at least perform in a way that is going to excel in some way when they feel that they've got their understanding of the role, clarity of what they need to do. They're enabled, but they're also supported. And salespeople are highly emotional people, male or female, to be quite frank. And so this idea that we don't invest in them and understand how they are, I think there's a number of people who talk about this online. Hannah's partly to do with this, which is mental well-being, supporting and making sure that all salespeople feel that they are listened to. And I think that is underestimated. When we think about people management, it comes back to my earlier point. People are people, and you have to understand them and motivate them. So I think empathy is completely underestimated in any form of management, but definitely in sales. I'm not saying when you're an empathetic leader, you don't look at the numbers. Of course you do, but you look at the human in front of you as well.
Absolutely. And what you can drive out of that particular individual. I'd love to kind of just talk about women who are listening and they hear C-suite and senior leadership and they get really excited and they think, I really want to leap into that area. I'll be honest, Penny, I would love to continue to advance my career and hopefully one day step into a CRO type role. But I'm also really honest with people that it's really hard. Sales can be really hard. I took on a vice president role, relocated my life to New York City. I've scaled this region to be the largest performing region in less than a year. But my God, it's been hard, So I wanted to kind of touch on that about anyone who wants to step into senior revenue roles. How do you recommend that they prepare for that leap with true confidence? Because it's not easy at times, but it's extremely rewarding.
I mean, I think this is advice for men and women, right? And I fully agree with you. A CRO role is hard. Like whether you're a male or a female, it's hard. I mean, I actually think it's one of the toughest jobs, actually. I mean, the CEO is the toughest job, but I'd say probably very close second is CRO, because and there's a whole other conversation we could have about what I think about having a CRO means. Why do we have a chief revenue officer? Revenue should be owned by the whole exec, but let's not go down that road. So I think a certain type of person, male or female, will want to be a CRO. And it is hard. It's incredibly rewarding. I mean, there's not much. I think in terms of preparation, the best thing you can do for that is getting yourself a mentor or a coach who's a CRO, who's been before. So finding that person who can help you level up and who can give you the key tips and tricks on what that means. The CRO at any sort of leadership level, and in the book we talk about this, what are the different things that you dial up or down each time you go up a level in sales leadership. So frontline sales team leadership is very much team first. You've always got team and business, right? But when you're a frontline manager or a first line manager, that's very much about how do I motivate the people? There's a different type of training you'd be looking at, which is how are you managing your book? How are you managing your opportunities? You're a little bit more in the trenches with them. Although one of the common things we've seen is that some of these managers, that leap from IC to manager is a big leap, because actually it's not about me, it's about we. And so you can't be a super rep, right? You've got to go and be a manager. And so I think real training in that first leap is super important. And then funnily enough, I don't think the leap from first line to second line or third line is actually that much of a leap, right? Because I found second and third line easier, because then it's really about how do I make sure that I'm managing my strategy really well and I'm leveling up my team that report into me. So I get A players as my team leaders, makes my job easier. And then it's about making sure they're doing the right thing. And then you're going cross-functionally, right? So the higher you go, the more you look up and sideways, right? And then the balance changes to, I've really got to think about the business. I've got to think about the wider business. So when you get to CRO, it's not just owning your team's number, it's owning the whole business number and motivating the C-suite. So the biggest jump for me in CRO really is, how do I work with someone who's not going to tell me what to do, right? I am responsible. There is nowhere to go, but I have to engage and involve and build relationships with the rest of my C-suite members on the exec team. And then you have to motivate below as well. So it's much more cross-functionally as you go higher up the food chain. And really, when you think about CRO, what's the scary thing about it? Well, I suppose there's nowhere to hide. But then if you know your numbers, if you're a good communicator, if you're good at building relationships, there's no reason why anyone can't be a CRO.
Absolutely. And I wanted to kind of continue that part of the conversation where you touched on mentors and champions and sponsors, like people who have done it before you, because that's a big one. And it comes up in the book. Can you just, because it's, for me in my career, I've actually never had training. I've never had formal training. I've never worked at a business that's actually given me training. A lot of this has come from hustle and grit and hard work. But I have always sought out coaches and mentors to advise and guide me. And I'm so lucky with this podcast, I can speak to people like you and actually get some great insights. But can you just give a bit of a view as to what's the difference between a mentor, a champion, and a sponsor? And how can women, men, anyone listening seek out the right one for them?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to do a shameless plug for a podcast with MedPit, because actually we did our first episode. Oh, I'm sorry, our third episode that's coming up for the Female Sales Leader podcast is going to be about this topic. And there were actually, I was one of 5 women who talked about this very point. So it's not been released yet, but it will be February. So first of all, what you're saying about training, you're not alone. It's actually really common. I was super lucky in that I had management training when I was at Merrill. It was hands down one of the best things, most impactful thing I've had in my career, because I had playbooks for one-to-ones. I understood how to run an effective one-to-one, how effectively to run team meetings, how to prioritize my own time as a manager, how to level up my sales team, how to report. It was unbelievable, right? And now I've taken that playbook and actually help advise companies now and leaders to do that. I think in terms of a mentor and champion and coach, so I'm going to put them in those ways. A mentor is more informal, right? So a mentor would be someone that you would probably go, it can be internal, external to your company. It would probably be someone who you would look at who is either in seat in your current role, who's really good at it, or who is in seat in the next role that you want to go to. We talk a bit in the book about how you find a mentor and how you turn up to be a good mentee. Often we find that when you go and find a mentor, people haven't done enough research. So you want to start thinking about, well, it's almost like finding a prospect, right? If you're a salesperson, you could go on LinkedIn and think, well, what's the profile that I'm looking for? You go straight to your network first. You've got to have a really good idea about what it is you want to get out of this mentorship. Often two people say, will you be my mentor? What for? So that's like anything. It's thinking about what you want to get out of it and what you think that person will bring, because you're asking that person for their time. And invariably, as people get senior, they actually want to do that, but they want to work with someone who really will listen and action, to be honest. So I think that's the first thing. A mentor is someone who's at that moment in time, you think you want to get some guided help, you do it unpaid, and you would find someone who's either at that, you're new to your job, who can help you or level up. A champion is more about what you're talking about, which we talked about, which is an internal champion. And this actually ties very much into what can male allies do to support women in sales. Well, a lot of women drop off, as we said, at the age of around childbearing ages. And no one's got their voice in the room. So when they're not there, who's speaking on their behalf? Who's promoting them? And who's then also helping guide them? And that's down to your male boss, male counterparts, allies, someone who sees potential in a woman. And that would be, I speak on their behalf when they're not in the room. I'm championing them. If you think of MedPick and sales, right? How do you build a champion? So it's down to the women to help build a champion. But quite frankly, it's really down to the male people listening to this podcast who have women in their team or women peers, female peers, and think, am I championing them? Am I letting their voice be heard in a room and when they're not in a room? And how can I amplify that? I'm going to give you an example of a champion that was for me. There was a guy called Imran who I worked with at SUSE, and he's Chief Customer Officer. I was Chief COO at the company there, and I was looking to leave, and he had put me forward as a CRO for a new company. And he spoke to someone who was looking for the role and said, you've really got to speak to Penny. She's very, very good. She'd be good at that role. Now, whether I'd have been recommended or not, I don't know for that. But certainly he was championing me when I wasn't in the room. He didn't tell me about this, but he saw qualities in me that he felt would work. He then became my mentor as I stepped into this role for the first month or two, that helped me feel the confidence in what I was doing. And then he sort of backed out. So that's a really good example of career advancement coming from someone else. And I actually think champions are single-handedly some of the most important things that career advance you in your career. And then finally, we talk a bit about coaches. So I do blended coaching for some clients, and that's really CROs. So people who've stepped into that first-time role. If they haven't been a CRO before, it's like, what practically do I need to do? Like, you've done it before. Do you have templates? And that's paid, right? So that's paid for by the business, who will say, right, I'm a first-time leader. I need the CRO actioned ASAP. And I think the thing that I would say to anyone listening to this is, you should be asking, stroke demanding in a constructive way, for investment in you, because any investment in you the business makes will yield results tenfold. So, but I'll often find women won't be asking for that investment. Men will. But women won't be asking for that investment, and they really should be thinking about that, because it's not only about personal development, it's actually about company ROI.
Absolutely. It's such a good call out. I think as well, you sort of touched on it there about, or earlier, when, you could be an amazing IC and then you step into that role, and it is extremely different when you have to think about your team and not just think about yourself anymore. And I think, everything you've just said there, mentors, champions. I have a champion, a male ally. I used to work with him. He was CEO of the company. And every time he comes to New York, he makes an effort to see me. And I'm so grateful to him, because he pushes me in certain directions. He's connected me with some amazing people, actually coaches he's connected me with that have advanced my career. And I'm very grateful for that. So any men listening, please absolutely keep that up. And then I'm very jealous, Penny, of your templated view of how to run one-to-ones. I must say I've had to learn a lot of this stuff on the job. But I guess I'll
send it to you, don't worry.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. I'd love to know, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're part of Pavilion, which is amazing for
I am.
CRO, revenue generating leadership roles. Talk to me a little bit about training courses outside of maybe mentors, champions, sponsors. Do you have any that you recommend to the listeners? I think Pavilion might even do a CRO training track potentially.
Yeah, they do. So Pavilion, for anyone who's listening and doesn't know, is a membership platform for effectively B2B, B2C actually, software software community effectively, and they have different levels of application. So you have executive for C-suite, there's VP, and then they have different segments, whether it be customer success, RevOps, CRO, etc. They have different revenue streams within that, where you can people openly share, and this is what I love about it, openly share their knowledge, and that will be templates, that'll be advice, that'll be whatever. But also Pavilion do have courses and forums and workshops, and then just breakfasts and lunches where you can actually harness that in a more focused way. I've done the CRO course, which is free if you're a member. I've done the enterprise sales course. And I also, another one I did, which was very good, was Winning by Design. So Winning by Design did a very good revenue architecture course. I really liked that. I would say to any CRO who's going into that role, that course is very strong. So yeah, they're all good. I think the blend of that for CRO and meeting with other CROs and then getting a coach, I think, or a mentor, I think that blend would put you in good stead, actually. There aren't enough courses, I don't think, that help with sales. I think there's, but then it's quite broad, right? I did have the Kellogg Sales Masterclass, which is for elite sellers, that was provided by the company for me, which again gave me a lot of playbooks. But I think it really depends on what you're looking for at that time. I think when you're looking at training, it's about what am I trying to achieve from that training? Because there's not a silver bullet, right? So this comes back to how do you manage your own career progression? How do you think about where and how you want to go, and putting that work in yourself, and then go to the community and ask people, where do I think I'm going to get the best return on investment?
Absolutely. And I do like mentorship with, junior professionals in sales. And I always say, like, be 2 steps ahead of where you want to go. Like, start doing the courses before you even get there. Don't leave it too late. Don't take on these big roles without having the backup support or the foundation.
Well, yes and no. I like to, because women tend to be a bit more cautious about stepping into roles. And my concern is that sometimes if we give the message, well, you've got to be careful before you go into the role, they'll even take an even further step back.
True.
There's that whole thing where they say, guys, men will apply for a job if they're 50% or 60% qualified, and women, will go unless they're 98. So there's this idea that actually a lot of women that I work with and coach, because part of what I do as female sales leader is offer up 3 free coaching slots a quarter to women who are moving into their next role of leadership. And I've now coached in the last year about 18, and every single one of them is holding back from promotion because they don't think they're ready. And I'm pushing them, going, no, get into it, fake it till you make it. You'll get some support network around you, and it's actually not as bad as you think. You've got to almost get into that role to learn it. So yes, I agree with you to a point, but I also wouldn't want someone to step back until they think they know everything.
True. You're so capable. You've got to where you've got to, like, keep going, keep pushing forward. That's a really good one. I like that you challenged me on that. So if anyone hasn't read The Female Sales Leader, do, and it's for all audiences, men, women, organizations. Read it, learn about it. And I love having you on, Penny, because you're just as passionate as I am about more women in sales, but mainly more women in that sales leadership. That's exactly why I started Wise, because I just didn't see enough of us out there. And it's always, for me, been such a
very good. It's like anyone, as long as you get the right coaching and guiding, you might have to do it yourself, right? And company men will come to you, but I'm telling you that, we need more women in leadership in general. We need any kind. I mean, it's not, I've focused today, we focus on women, but all diversity needs to happen at C-suite, because otherwise we're just getting companies being run in a very sort of singular focused lens. And women bring so much to the table, and they bring some humanity and empathy. I'm not saying men don't have it, but I've been on enough execs teams now to know that it could really dial up on having more diversity there, which will filter down to a much stronger culture and outcomes for companies.
Amazing. Well, look, it's been such a pleasure. I always finish up, Penny, with a few quick fire questions. And I wonder whether the first one will be hard for you, because there are so many traits that make up a sales leader. So I'm going to ask you to pick, first question, what do you think is the one trait that is most critical for anyone stepping into sales leadership today?
Willingness to learn, open mindset and willingness to learn. It's got to be that growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I always look out for when I interview people is coachability as well. Are you leaning into coaching? You know, you've got to be adaptable. What about for you? And we are focusing on women because it is my Wise podcast, but a female sales leader for you, Penny, a mentor who's really inspired you on your journey.
It would have to be Melissa DiDonato, who is CEO and chair of Kyriba at the moment, and she was CEO at SUSE when I worked there. Melissa is a force of nature when you see her online. She's doing a lot at the moment. She's also created Inner Wings charity, which is to build confidence in young girls at school. She's also working with the government around STEM and diversity there. And then she is on the board of a non-exec for Porsche. I mean, there's a hot list as long as your arm. But what she is herself, and she is very female. She's very smart and also a real advocate. She got me in the DOO role effectively for SUSE. And what she showed me was how you can be female and yourself, but you demand a seat of where you are and you deliver. And I love that about her. So yeah, I would have to say her.
I will definitely be checking out Melissa, and we'll put the link to her profile in the article that we publish as well. Really amazing. Sounds like she's doing some awesome work. And if there was one book or a podcast, could be yours, maybe either it could be your podcast or your book, that's really helped you in your approach to sales leadership through your career, what book would that be?
Well, I'm gonna probably say something a bit controversial. I'm not going to say one sale. I'm not going to say anything to do with sales. So I was thinking about podcasts, and actually I like blends of things to read. So and it will really depend on what I'm trying to do at the time. So there are some sales go-tos, right? As I said, the Winning by Design I felt was really good. MedPick was another one, the course I did there. I felt that was really strong. Andy White's online course is genius. But I also like to look at behavioral things for me. So high performance work. I've got ADHD, so I need always to think about focus, high performance, bring myself down to simplicity. And so I've loved, I can't recommend one, but I can think about different things. Radical Candor is a really good one for feedback to people. The Revenue Architecture is really good for a CRO. Medic is good for sales methodology. And then in terms of podcasts, I love listening to entrepreneurial ones, people who've done startups. So I love listening to obviously the Diary of a CEO, but also This is Entertainment, This is Politics. I always try and listen to things outside of sales, because otherwise you can become very narrow focused, and actually some of the best ideas can come from outside of the world we're in and living in.
What really stands out to me there is, and I think you said it when you were describing Melissa, although I see it a lot with you as well, is like authenticity as well. You said it earlier, people buy from people. And I think I'm really passionate about behavioral science. I'm doing a lot of research at the moment myself about connection, like fundamental connection. And we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but AI is changing the world, but people will still be there, and partnerships and strategic conversation and the power of, authentic conversation, sometimes not narrowing yourself into a box as well. Be curious, be empathetic, be adaptable.
Communication, I think, is going to become the thing, right? It's actually, I think learning communication, behavioral science, that, if anything, is going to become, I think, really, because what AI does, democratize knowledge, right? So it's accessible to everyone, but then it's what do you do with that knowledge? How do you connect with the humans? And I think for me, that's going to be very interesting when we think about sales.
Absolutely. And what a wonderful place to close up as well, Penny. Thank you. You've been wonderful. Thank you for all the work that you've done to support women, being such an advocate for us in this space. And you're incredibly inspiring with what you've achieved in your career. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. But no, thank you so much for having me. It's a great topic, and well done on pushing forward with this podcast.
Thank you so much, Penny. Speak to you soon.